very, very vastly, exhaustively debated motion by my dear colleagues that centers around vaccine financing in our country. Mr. Speaker, sir, over the last 2 decades, our country has made a lot of progress in vaccination of our children. And of course, we've realized that there's been a drop in 31% in infant mortality because of this. But as my dear colleague has said, and Mr. Speaker, I think it's imperative for me to highlight this, that even though there's a lot of concern about the body of the motion and so on and so forth, Mr. Speaker, I think we need to point out that since 2001, Bill and Melinda Gates and all other international donors have provided support towards immunization in our country. Of course, Mr. Speaker, sir, and that made us eligible for that funding. After the rebasing of our economy that said that you had to be under $1,580 per capita to make you eligible for this kind of funding, Nigeria was outside of that, and therefore Nigeria became ineligible for this kind of assistance in the funding for our vaccines. Now, Mr. Speaker, the problem that we presently face as a country is that in the event that as a country we do not start to incrementally come up with some kind of intervention, that less and less Nigerian children are going to have access to vaccinations, because the budget as is presently constituted with the incremental pullout of these interventions, if that does happen, Mr. Speaker, and we do not create some kind of alternative funding, then it means that we just will not as a country be able to vaccinate our children. It is a very dire reality. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, I am in absolute agreement. I don't want to overflog the issue because he has come up with a lot of statistics. But the imperative thing, Mr. Speaker, is that for us to realize that if we do not do something as Parliament, and I'm glad that the Deputy Chairman Appropriations is here, if we do not do anything with Parliament, as Parliament to make that intervention, that the $141 million that is required per annum is going to go down to $74 million. And that $74 million, even as is today, Mr. Speaker, sir, only vaccinates 44% of our children. So you can imagine that if we do not do something as Parliament to mitigate that, even less Nigerian children are going to be immunized. I know that a lot of my colleagues have said that the intervention should be in all healthcare. But if the children start to die even before they get to the ages where they become adults, then, Mr. Speaker, it has economic implications, it has growth implications, it has all kinds of implications on our country, quite aside from the fact that we're not going to be on the scale of countries that have done anything. Of course, it also affects our SDG, infant mortality, and so on and so forth. So, Mr. Speaker, this is very, very important, because the inability of us to have this intervention will have far-reaching indications on the bottom line as a country on all our indicators. Therefore, my dear colleagues, I will urge that we most definitely support this motion, and I would also urge that the Chairman Appropriation take absolute note of this, so that as in the run-up to the budget, that he makes it priority. I so submit. Thank you.